Hi, folks. I wanted to give you an update because, it's been like almost a week since I set off on my sort of experimental trip down the Hudson in my boat. Let me just apologize real quick for this video because I've got a pretty bad stomachache, and also I'm up in my attic and it's about 105 degrees. Maybe that's why I have a stomachache. This is my attic, though. This is where I do my work. This is where I live right now. And I got all my Erie Canal books sort of over here, and a lot of my Ohio River history there. Anyway, so it's tomorrow's going to be Friday. It'll be a week since I put the boat in the water. I go into a place. Here's what I hear. "What are you doing here? I thought you left." That's a frequent refrain over the last week. I say to those people, "Boy, you remind me of my ex-girlfriend." I feel a bit philosophical this past week. I've been planning this project for 19 years, and it became very real when I had my last day of work. And then since then, things are, I'm doing it, I wanted to set out the same day that I had my last day of work. The me of 21 or 31 would have set out that day. I'd have said, you're never going to be ready, and you won't know what problems you're going to face until you start. So just start. Delaying is for indecisive people who undecide their lives away. To delay for weeks went against my considered and decided policy that I've built my life on over the last 20 years, the very thesis of my book, Coming of Age on the Hudson, which says, if you want to do something you don't know how to start, just pick an arbitrary step and start. And that's the only way to find out how to move forward. So, I think that was the right policy in my 20s. But maybe there's a danger to adopting a policy when you're young and continuing to have that policy without reassessing it as you get older, because times change, your goals change, everything changes, and you need to adapt your policy. So I delayed, and I think that was the right thing to do. And I even baked in a week of testing my boat, on the river south of Albany, where I'm familiar with the waters, having gone on that 10-mile stretch of river more than any other stretch over the last 20 years. And now that a week has gone by and I've tested the boat, I'm delaying again. And I'm able to deal with that by telling myself two things. One, I have other stuff that I need to do before leaving, like yard work and cleaning. And two, that whether I'm actually on a boat or not, I'm still living the life that I want. I'm writing, I'm interviewing people, I'm exploring just around here and not, over there. So since the last update video, I took the boat from Troy to Coeymans, about 23 miles downstream, and here's how that week went. Monday afternoon at 2, it was high tide. If I'm going to go south, you want to start at high tide because then the water's going to flow out. Had all my batteries, I thought, charged, and I really wanted to go as far as I could with the electric batteries and electric motors without using my gas motor. 23 miles is quite ambitious. My general goal on these trips is 10 to 15 miles. So at first it was a beautiful day. I set out from Ingalls Avenue boat launch, went under the Route 7 bridge. I saw people at Ryan's Wake, Brown's, sort of waving to me. There were other boats. It was quite pleasant, and I was moving through a south wind, a headwind, and that was great, and I was happy to make progress, though I did have to have my motor on its utmost setting, which, of course, depletes the battery power in an exponential way compared to like the first setting or the second setting. But I went south fighting the south wind, and I got under the Troy Water Volite Bridge by Footsie's and J.P. Morgan within about 1 hour. Um, then a storm hit, and it poured for an hour, and the back of the boat, got wet, which is fine. I was able to get into the cabin. I wasn't wet, but I noticed, it caught me with my batteries out. And I can't help but think that a layer of moisture connecting the poles of two batteries has the same effect as a wire connecting the two batteries, shorting it out and moving the electrons from the positive terminal from the negative terminal to the positive terminal and depleting the battery by averaging out the voltage differential. Probably not good to leave batteries out in the rain, in other words. But after an hour, the storm passed and it was beautiful again. But my motor, by that point, about 1 hour and a half into it, was clearly not moving me as strongly as it had been, even though I've got on the same high settings, because the voltage of the battery had become depleted over that hour and a half. So I depleted my most charged battery at that point. So here's the thing. I got a battery charger. It's a 4-bank battery charger, 8 amps. I thought I was getting a battery charger that charged 4 batteries at 8 amps apiece. Now, each battery is 100 amp hours. So you divide 100 by 8, and that would tell you how many hours it would take to charge up your battery. It's a 4-bank, 8 amp battery charger, which charges each battery at 2 amps. 2 times 4 equals 8. So that is a very, very slow charger. 8, 10, 12 amps is normally what a battery charges at. So subsequently, I realized that, I actually had, at least my lithium batteries, were only at about, 35% charge when I left. Didn't realize that before then. But hey, this is a shakedown cruise. That's the point. I'm learning things as I go along. All right. So the motor beeped and it died. And I was about 5 miles above Albany, probably about 4 miles south of where I'd set out in Troy. So now I'm using this remote control trolling motor. It's sophisticated. That's nice. It beeps when you hit a button. Let me turn to the left. Beep. It's actually working. But, apparently when the battery dies, it goes beep, 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 and then it just stops working. Okay. I wish it would perhaps give a beep like a minute before it would stop working rather than just dying as soon as, the battery is depleted without warning. But that's what happened. So I had to change battery. Okay. So then I put on a lithium battery, and one of the new lithium batteries I have, these things are quite sophisticated. It's Eco-Worthy is the brand, 100 amp hour battery. These guys have Bluetooth built into them. You just look for it the way you would look for a Bluetooth speaker, and it brings up a display as long as you have the app, and it'll tell you this is how much is being used right now. This is how much capacity it has left. This is therefore the estimated time left working at this amount. So that was really cool to be able to bring this up. Unfortunately, like I said, these batteries were only at like 35%, even though I had had them charging for like 8 hours on the 2 amp battery. So anyway, it tells me I got about an hour and 25 minutes on with using this trolling motor at, let's say, at 2. So I try to turn it up, let's say, turn up to 5. It's utmost capacity. Oops, drops down to 35 minutes. So I'm thinking, I got the tide with me. The wind is coming from the side, not necessarily at me. Let's use it at the low setting because I'm going to try and see if I can use these batteries to get me all the way south below the port of Albany. So, that was okay. At the 2 setting, the 3 setting, I could steer, but it wasn't enough to propel me to add any miles per hour in addition to what the tide was giving me. And the wind was certainly not helping. whatever. On the second battery, I got as far as Albany. Like by as far as Albany, I'm saying like above where Alive at 5, used to be held. What it passes for the riverfront of Albany, where there is literally just heroin addicts, sleeping on the dock. But at least, these young couple was walking by and somebody shouted, "Is that a hybrid?" And I said, "Yeah, it is." "What kind of hybrid?" I said, "Homemade, man." And they were like super cool and shouting out, like, "That's so cool." So that was great. And then the battery died again, so I had to switch out another battery. I got about 7 batteries on this boat, and they're all, the first one I started was 100%. Second one was 35%. So the first one got me about 4 miles. Second one got me about a mile. The next battery moved me from like where you have Alive at 5, past the USS Slater, past the Dutch Apple, which is 3/4 of a mile, and then that battery died. So now I'm looking at the batteries I have left. So I got 2 batteries in my house bank, if you want to call it, that's attached to the solar panel and the windmill, which also doesn't seem to be working. Well, I take the battery off the back of the house bank because I'm really trying to get through the Port of Albany using my electric system, and then I figured after that I'll turn on my gas motor, but it's all wonky. I don't want to mess with that when I'm in the middle of the Port of Albany. So I take my battery off the house bank, and now all the display goes all on the fritz, shows every single error message that you can have because I've dropped below the 24 volts that I need to operate this, blah, blah. So I put it on. Now I get about 1/10 of a mile. I'm right in the Port of Albany. There's a gigantic tanker that's 2 city blocks long and 6 stories high. And then on the left side is 2 different like piers with like petroleum pumping stations and signs that say like "keep out." I'm like, I just got to get past this. But that damn battery dies. Now I'm like, geez, now I'm starting to think like, well, I got a battery that's attached to my starting motor, but I would have to like unwire all that stuff. Or I got a battery that's at the front of my boat, and that's where all my navigation lights and my bilge pumps are all hooked up. I'd have to unwire all of that stuff and then bring it back and hook this stuff up. Meanwhile, when this motor dies, it just happens suddenly, beep, beep, and then it's dead without warning. And I'm going down the river like this. Oh, and isn't it great that my boat, when I'm doing that, says Dallas Trombley on the side, like I'm a moron who doesn't know what I'm doing. I was joking. I wish I had a little like lampshade that like when things are going well, it says Dallas Trombley, and when things are going really poorly and I'm about to, crash into something, then I can put a little lampshade down and you won't know who I am. Anyway, before I could really make a decision about what battery to sacrifice from my reserves, wind picks up and just blows me into the western shore where there's a bit of a cove where it's just rocks. So I can't really do too much about it except use my depleted battery to somewhat help me get into that cove. Now I'm hitting on rocks. And now I'm really sort of realizing the problem with operating on margin. And by operating on margin, I mean, your last bit of what you have. When you buy on margin, you're buying with like, I've taken out every loan that I could possibly get just so I could buy a little more of this stock because I think it's going to really take off or whatever for this property. When you're on margin, you have got absolutely no room for error. You've got no margin of error. And that's the problem. So now I'm at the bottom of my battery bank. I'm by myself. There's nothing I can do if there's no contingency, right? And that's the problem, right? So, I'm blown into this cove. Now I don't have anybody here on this boat with me. So I've got to simultaneously jump off and use my foot as best as I can to keep the boat from hitting rocks, to keep the propellers from hitting these rocks because I'm in 6 inches of water. Let me try and throw an anchor. Okay, so I throw an anchor, but I'm in such shallow water that the anchor is not doing anything. At the same time, I'm using my foot to keep myself off these rocks. And now I got to transition out of the electrical system and get my gas motor going, which requires, unfortunately, from a cold start, taking the cowling off the engine, hitting this plunge switch that controls the choke, going up to where the re- remote control and throttle system is, and the ignition system. And okay, so I get it started, and of course I'm pumping with the primer bulb. So I get the motor started. Okay, but it's now the motor, because of the wind, is dug into 6 inches of mud, and it won't start. I get it started, get the engine started, and then it chokes out and dies because it can't transfer the energy into the propeller because the propeller is embedded in mud. So now I've got to get into the water up to my waist, push this boat off that's being pushed into the rocks by the wind until I can get into like a few inches of water, maybe even like push the ass end of this thing out so that that's in deeper water and the front is crashing into the rocks. Get that thing started. It gets started. Now, okay, like pop it in reverse. And now, okay, I'm backing up and backing up and backing up. I got this thing started. Of course, there's mud going through the water, but whatever, I did it. I got the motor going, the gas motor, and now I get back into the channel as close to the west shore as possible. And I'm like, let me get out of the port. I just don't want to be around these big, gigantic boats. And especially because, there's people working on these boats. People are looking at me. They're like, if this guy doesn't know what he's doing, we don't want this guy crashing into my petroleum pier, So I get going, it's good. The problem is this boat, and again, this is the whole purpose of the Shakedown sort of cruise, is to realize these problems, right? This boat handles like a spoon. Everything is very smooth on the bottom, but there's nothing to keep it going straight. So if you had a nice spoon that you were somehow in the middle of and you're going down, and you go like, think it's going to go this way, and then it's going to keep going this way. There's nothing to keep it going straight. I need dagger boards. I need something to keep the boat going straight. I'm on this boat now, going out of the port with my gas engine, with a homemade tiller. I got to take 3 steps to the left to get the boat engine to point to the right in order to get me to go to the right. And oops, now I've overcompensated. Now I got to take 4 steps to the right to get the boat engine to point to the left to go back, and I'm going down the river in a zigzag sort of way. What a conflicting sort of feeling. I'm feeling like I'm doing this. I'm doing what I wanted to do, and something I have done, but haven't done it in like 8 years, and very seldom have done it alone. So, there's this, on the one hand, this euphoric feeling that like I'm doing it. On the other hand, there's this feeling that this is taking every ounce of energy that I have. And if anything goes wrong, if I cannot even bend down to grab my cell phone to reply to a text from my mom that I see, because if I take my hand off the tiller, I'm going to go and end up facing all backwards, going down like a spinning top. So, that is an up and down sort of philosophical, experience, emotional experience. So that was that. So then now I did make it south of the port. Now I got about, let's say 4 miles, 5 miles to get to Henry Hudson Park, which was my destination for the night. Again, this is Monday night. My destination is Henry Hudson Park because I know that they have a gazebo with a plug where I could plug in my batteries. But now I'm using the gas motor. Well, now my front navigation lights are on, even though it's a little too early. But, the navigation buoys aren't on. So, okay, I'm legal. But I can't. The back navigation light, which is just a white light, I don't know where it is. I can't bend down to get it. I can't take my hand off the tiller. So I got to use a flashlight to put that out. Now I'm like, geez, I'm really starting to push this here, the legality and the safety of this thing. Long story short, get to Henry Hudson Park about 9:15. That's great. I was actually planning, I told my parents to meet me there, at 9. So I was only about 15 minutes late at the end of the day, and that 15 minutes is probably attributable to me getting blown into the cove. So I'm not off but also I'm not feeling, great. I'm not feeling like this is a replicatable experience. I'm not feeling like this is an experience that I want to repeat on a daily basis. But so I get there. My parents brought me some Chinese food. I had this kind of gleeful experience, which was basically there's a dock at Henry Hudson Park. It says you can only launch your boat from here. If you now they got like a fishing pier and there's no light on it. So I'm like, all right, I'm going into the darkness. So I'm going down into the darkness. And also like I got to charge my bonus. I got to charge my batteries, right? So taking the batteries off with my dad in the dark, trying to kind of like avoid the street lights to plug in these batteries in a clandestine fashion because we're technically, I guess, stealing electricity and I'm not allowed to tie up to the dock. I felt like I was 17. I felt like I'm like, this is fantastic. I mean, this is an adventure. And I really felt like my dad was also kind of getting a kick out of it. It was 75, So that was great. So then, like they left and now this is, Monday night, whatever. I got my boat set up and let me try and go to sleep. I move things around. Generally, I sleep in the bottom of the boat and I put out a few cushions and a bag. Now, this would be my third night sleeping on the boat. The first night, there was a mosquito or two. Second night, no mosquitoes. This night, my goodness, it sounded like a biblical. I mean, I'm taking screens and putting it over my head. Even though I got the whole thing closed up, these mosquitoes can get through the little holes. Oh, it was awful and it was very hot. And then at 2 o'clock in the morning, I got so frustrated. I was like, let me just put my sleeping bag over myself. But when I put my head up, sat up, I saw that the whole cabin was illuminated because there was just a car parked in Henry Hudson Park with its street lights directly shining on my boat. I was thinking, hopefully this is just some kids making out and they're so stupid that they left the street lights on. But more likely, this is a police officer who is shining a light on my boat, and any minute now I'm going to, I don't know, they're going to come over and then I have to have a conversation. Oh, I'm sorry, officer. My navigation light broke down. My electrical system broke, and this was the most intelligent thing I could think of that was safe to not be a navigation hazard. But if you want, I'll anchor. That if you think that's the better course. Oh, by the way, don't look at the gazebo where I'm stealing a whole bunch of electricity. Stealing. After an hour, whatever, that car went away, and I got about 2 hours of sleep. And then I woke up. The sunrise was at 5:34 in the morning. I don't want to ever sleep. I don't want to be seen sleeping in the boat like some vagabond. And so then, let's say that would have been. I guess that was a Monday. So I guess all of that had happened on a Sunday. So the next day was a Monday, and I get up, and like at first I saw the big tanker that was in the Port of Albany that went downstream. So it was cool to see that go down, and as the fog and moisture was sort of like evaporating off the river from the rising sun. And then I figured, let me go around and just pick up all the trash in Henry Hudson Park. It's something I want to do along the way. I want to pick up as much trash as possible. So I went to the fishing pier I was at, and there was fishermen left like bags of like chicken breasts, apparently just to die, just to rot away. Apparently they don't care about anybody else. I walk along the shore, and now I find a bag of fish heads. I don't get it with the fishermen. First of all, let me just say this. I never met a fisherman that was friendly. I mean, they're all jerks. I've never met one that was actually nice to me. It seemed like every other type of person, at least some of them are nice, but I've never met a single fisherman that was nice. They all seem like they don't care about anybody else, and they're, doing their own thing and leaving their lines and their crap all over the place. So I pick up the fishermen's chicken breasts in a bag and fish heads in a bag. And, and then I just went around picking up, water bottles, paper towels, those things that people leave, cigarette butts. It occurs to me, if I'm going to do this, I got to bring uh, gloves, because who knows what people are throwing away. I picked up about 30 gallons worth of garbage and threw it in. That made me feel better for the rest of the day. Because, if anybody says, oh, you stole electricity, and I can be like, well, yeah, okay, but I also performed this public service. And B, like throughout the day, there was like old people and stuff like walking around and sitting at these picnic tables that would have had rotting meat and green bottle flies going around had not I, picked up other people's garbage. I don't mind picking up other people's garbage. I mean, I wish it wasn't there, but what are you going to do? It is there. So, you know, if I don't want it to be there, I have to pick it up. I mean, that's pretty much how it works. It's kind of a society and a microcosm. So that was great. I saw this kid with a very big beard and a lot of hair, and I guess assumed, I guess just 'cause I was in a kind of a negative mood, like that he was another like fisherman guy who would be unfriendly. Then I saw he sat in like a lawn chair and he had this literature put out in front of him. I ended up going to talk to him. His name was Jamie Bratt, and he was actually working to educate boaters about invasive species. And over the course of the day, I kept going back and talking to him. He was a great, knowledgeable kid, and we did an interview. It was my first interview with somebody that I just met on the shore, so that was good. And then I went down when it was high tide again, having charged my batteries for about 10 hours and getting up to only about 35% because of the very small charge. I set out to go down to Henrietta Park. The tide was in my favor. The wind was in my favor. I'm using the batteries. Still, I'm only going about a mile an hour. In fact, at one point, I just turned off my motor and just allowed myself to kind of just drift and kind of like steer because I wasn't going any faster using my motor than I was just drifting. And then I went into Coeymans Marina. Very fortunate. I called because I've never done this before. I've never gone into a marina and like rented a dock slip. I had no idea what I was doing, so I called, and luckily my good friend Brandon Lefevre answered the phone, and he's kind of like running the show, and he's out there with a deckhand. He tells me exactly where I need to dock rather. I get up there, you shouldn't have this kind of rope, you should have this kind of rope. I think I got some. Very helpful. I never realized before, I thought that when you would dock at a marina, it was like getting a parking space. You're just there, and that's the service that you're providing for. I didn't realize this is a whole community. Everybody's got a boat. Everybody's helping other people. Oh, you're trying to get that refrigerator in your boat? Oh, help me, Jan, it's great. People are coming over and talking to me. They've got their own, sort of like a setup just for people who are like renting. If it's at night, everybody can kind of just sit around in an area and converse. Maybe there might be a keg or something. And I have really enjoyed being at this marina, because everybody is super helpful. So that's where I am now. I'm at the marina. I took the boat out yesterday on the advice of Brandon, who realized that there was like stuff, kind of floating underwater that we couldn't tell what it was. Ended up just being some latex paint that had peeled off, but who knew, if it was like some fiberglass or there was a hole. So the boat is out of the water. It is safely on land. There are multiple people down at the Coeymans Marina who are helping me and facilitating me to find a better motor than the gas motor that I have now, because I have too much horsepower and too much weight at the back for what I need, and not the correct size propeller. The propeller that I have is for a speedboat that it spins very fast and gets you to plane like this, like so the front of your boat is out. I need a smaller motor that moves a bigger, flatter prop with more surface area for more of a forward push like a barge would have. I have to repair the paint that's on the bottom of the boat. I have to use this anti-fouling paint, and I've got to consider several other things about weight distribution, the trailer construction, and how the boat sits on the trailer, and how to store some of my equipment outside of the cabin so the cabin's totally clear. I'm going to get some dry bags. Also, apparently at marinas, you have 30 amp service. It looks like a washing or a dryer like plug. You can't just plug in a 110 volt, 110 standard outlet like you would use for an AC appliance in your house. I had to get a converter for that. So I learned a lot. And over the next, let's say 5 or 6 days, hopefully I will put what I learned into implementation, make the changes I need to make, and be able to get the boat, back in the water so I can actually start to go back upstream in order to go to the Erie Canal. But one thing I have to say that I've taken solace from is, I was going back and flipping through some of my seamanship books about the Erie Canal, whatever, and like one was just had an appendix on general guidance for boaters, and the advice said about schedules, and it said, throw out your schedule if you are on a boat. Everyone I have ever met who has had a problem on their boat had that problem because they were trying to get to a specific place by a specific time, and they were forcing it when it was not what they should be doing. And I realized over the 12 or 13 boats that I've built over the years, all of my problems come from the same thing, including on my Shakedown cruise when I'm trying to go 25 miles by 9 o'clock when I specifically designed my boat for a 10-mile range. So, unfortunately, people ask me, when are you launching? When are you going to be at this particular place? I can't tell you. And in fact, that's the philosophy of the boat. I won't tell you. I won't even try and figure it out myself because I can't. That's how you get into trouble. So I'll let you know when I do get the boat working. And then, if you're around, within the next 48 hours, I might be able to predict where I'm going to be. But anything, more than that is too far ahead to predict. Anyway, this is my update. I don't know if you enjoyed it or not. There's a lot of information here. It's not very particularly entertaining. In the future, they will be. But I just wanted to make people, sort of aware of where I am and that I'm still on shore. And yes, if you see me, I'm still here. Thanks.